Hello, Frizzle Frenzy! I've read 9 books, and the names of those are in this cup, and I will be pulling these out in 3 rounds of 3. And in each round, I have to decide which book I would reread, which book I would rewrite, and which book I would recycle. So here we go! She-Hulk, the comics by Dan Slott, edited and its partner book unedited, Seasons of War. What's our easiest decision here? I'm recycling edited? What happens in this book? There's a guy, and he's the main character. And then he discovers that he can edit reality because he's the main character. And there's this girl that he's obsessed with who has dumped him. And this book is dull, unmotivated, unorganized, and weird. I put a lot of work into my Goodreads review, so I really want to read it to you. Because I was trying to capture 2 things with this review. 1, how I felt about this book. 2, how it feels to read this book. This review was me emotionally and artistically responding to how this book made me feel. The blurb for this book calls it a love story. I don't really think that this book is a story, much less a love story, which at least implies that there are characters you can root for. It's not a story. It's more like a ramble. A vagabond stumbling through the desert, parched, meandering, hopeless, and boring. Here's who I would recommend this book to. People who love the movie 500 Days of Summer for a loser protagonist pining after a doomed relationship. People who like it when the author is a character in the book, not in a John Green way, more like in a Lego movie way. People who like it when books prioritize weirdness over plot. I know these people are out there, and I hope this book finds them, which is why I've decided to recycle it for this challenge. I have a lot to say about this book, but most of it would be an angry rant, so I'll just abstain. The part of this book that bothered me the most is when Liga is complaining that no one likes his endings, how he can't write good endings, how they're problematic for him, and I've read other Liga books, I loved the endings, it was my favorite thing about the books! You can find the review where I talk about that, I'll link it in the footnotes. So to have our page time wasted with a pity party is lame, but to have it wasted on a critique that isn't even accurate, even worse. This book seriously angered me. I had high hopes for it and it bombed everyone. See, that's an example of a superfluous footnote that doesn't give you any extra information. This book has a lot of footnotes, by the way. Did you notice? Of course, I couldn't help myself. I had to include some pretentious and contradictory footnotes to help you understand what reading this book is like. Or maybe I didn't write a review at all. Maybe this is all in your head. A complicated and irrelevant dream sequence. You're on Goodreads. The beige color scheme reminds you of the stucco Walmart building you once kissed a girl in. But wait, you don't have lips. They're all blurry. They say to you, the password is broccoli. You nod, then panic. Where does the key go? You try it in your bike lock? Finally, a way to escape. You wake up, only to find your blanket has been replaced by a mat of woven bacon. Dream sequences don't have quotation marks. You wouldn't know that if you'd ever dreamed before. I rated this book 1 star, and its book tone is chiffon yellow, which means it's a book that is atmosphere and intellectual focused. So then we've got 2 more books, Seasons of War and She-Hulk. I've got a better idea of how to rewrite She-Hulk, so I'm rewriting that one. One of the things that this book kept reminding me of was that it's a book centered on a female character, but it's written by a man. And that's not always a bad thing. Through the magic of fiction, we can write outside of our own experiences. But I feel like this book had a lot of the trappings of a feminine story without any of the satisfying follow-through. Let me elaborate. Throughout this run of comics, there are lots of love interests for She-Hulk. It starts right off the bat showing you that she's sleeping around with a bunch of models and becoming a little bit of a scandal. But then she starts bonding with a single guy and they start going a little steadier and there is an unfolding love plot there. However, the comic makes it very clear to us that her very considerate neighbor and co-worker has a huge crush on her and of course is the one we should be rooting for because he respects her as her and not just because she's She-Hulk. So that feels like a setup to a more feminine story in that there's an interesting love triangle dilemma and character arc setup that you don't often see in more masculine stories. Is there a lot of page time devoted to coworker guy being sad that he doesn't get to date She-Hulk? Yes. But does that ever lead to relationship development between him and She-Hulk? No. It's just drawn out until it's like, I hope you've already forgotten about that because we're not circling back anytime soon. So if I was rewriting this, I would take advantage of that setup that the book already has. Maybe there could be a moment where She-Hulk realizes that the guy she's dating kind of likes her more for She-Hulk than for her normal human form, and that can tie in with her character arc of self-acceptance because in this comic she's having a really hard time accepting her non-Hulk form. So part of her accepting herself can also be her realizing that she needs to find a love interest who can also accept that part of her. I rated the She-Hulk run by Dan Slott 4 stars, and its book tone is Byzantium purple, which means emotional and plot character focus. Which leaves us to reread Seasons of War, which is Skullduggery Pleasant Book 13. This is a fantasy series that really relies on the subversion of expectations, and the farther you get into the series, the more that becomes apparent. Some of that means that these books have some really good plot twists, so I will not talk about those. But there are lots of little moments of the humor where you're expecting a character to act really heroic and that's when they fail, or you're expecting a character to fail and that's when they grow heroic. If you're looking for a book series that will surprise and entertain you and has well-rounded characters, this series is great. I rated Seasons of War 3 stars, and its book tone is jade green, which means it's emotional and character atmosphere focused. I am so glad to be filming this video. I love filming recent reads videos, and I've been trying to film this one for 2 weeks, and every time I've gone to film, something has made it impossible. Last night when I tried to film, my roommates threw a party. Excuse you having a social life instead of an obsession with books? Who do you think you are? And here we go for round 2. Court of Mist and Fury, Natural History of Dragons, and Turn of the Tide. The most rereadable of these is definitely A Court of Mist and Fury. What makes a book rereadable? For me, it's when there are good character arcs. If the book is only fun because of the surprises in it, it doesn't always make a good reread. And I know I just put a book that I said was like that into the reread category last round, but I wanted to reread it more than the other 2 books, okay? But like A Court of Mist and Fury, I legitimately would reread because the strength of this is in those character arcs and those relationships that are being developed. The political plots of the fairies' war and stuff, I couldn't care less in this book. The slow character development for Feyre as she overcomes her trauma from book 1, and the delicious relationship development between her and Rhysand as they slowly get to know each other and become friends, and then that slowly tips over into romance. Yes, I'd read that again. And if you want more of my thoughts on this, I've got an entire review video for it, which I will link in the footnotes for you. I rated A Court of Mist and Fury 4 stars, and its book tone is Resolution Blue, which means emotional and character focused. Okay, next, Turn of the Tide, Natural History of Dragons. I've got an idea of how to rewrite Natural History of Dragons. So this book is really intellectual, in a way that sometimes it feels like I forgot to have characters or stakes. So this book is like alternate universe Victorian England, where there is a lady, Isabella, who wants to go become a scientist studying dragons out in the wild, but this is a no-no because of social pressures and norms. But she goes out anyway with a team of adventurers to study the dragons. So here's what we gotta do with her. We gotta give her character stakes and plot goals. Isabella spends much of the narration bemoaning that no one trusts her or respects her because she's a woman. Where's the proof? Most of the people in this book actually do take her pretty seriously and respect her opinions and her capabilities. So I want to give her some more friction there. We're going to make one of the members of her adventuring party a villain who is like very actively sexist. And through the course of the book, she has to win him over through her competence, giving her character relationship stakes and goals. We can even make this guy the head of the expedition so that if she fails this, she has the stake that she's not going to be able to continue going on the expedition or do repeats in the future. And then plot goals. What are they trying to study about dragons? Just to study the dragons, you know? No, we need to give her like a research question. Like, for example, we could make her research question, why did the dragon bones crumble? Or maybe she heard reports of the dragons being extra aggressive in this area. And the question is, why are the dragons being so aggressive and what can we do to stop it? And these are both smaller questions that she's kind of interacting with throughout the book. But I just want to like choose one and make that the main thing. And then every time she's discovering something about dragons, tie it in. So all these little scientific discoveries, instead of feeling just like little discoveries, they are working towards this goal that we can get on board with. I rated Natural History of Dragons 3 stars, and its book tone is chiffon yellow, which means intellectual and atmosphere focused. Which leaves me to recycle Turn of the Tide. This is a time travel romance story. But the time travel is a lady going from like Victorian England to Georgian England. Like just going back in time a few decades. And I'm like, why was there even time travel? Like I understand it's in a larger series of time travelers, but like it didn't serve anything to the narrative. And the romance was fine. Our main character guy was top tier, dreamy, perfect, always perfect. But where was the conflict? I would have really loved, now I'm getting into how I would rewrite this book. No, we're just recycling it, throwing it out. It was perfectly enjoyable, but I don't have any desire to reread it, and I would rather rewrite the other one. It's got some interesting pirate and ghost plot lines in addition to the time travel, so there's a lot going for this one. I rated Turn of the Tide 3 stars, and its book tone is resolution blue, which means emotional and character focused. And before we get into round 3, we have our dishonorable mentions. The dishonorable mentions section is for books that I gave up on so quick that I feel like I cannot review competently. This month we only have one dishonorable mention, which is great, and it is Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead. I really liked book 1. This book 2 was so lacking in flavor. In book 1, when the main character was being a little stupid, it was almost endearing in the chaoticness. Here in book 2, it drove me crazy because it didn't feel like there was any purpose to it. And now, round 3! Bride Test, the Firebird Chronicles, books 1 through 3, and Spy Family. In like round 1, it was hard because there was none that I wanted to reread. Now it's hard because I kind of want to reread all of them. Okay, here's what I have the most to say on is the Firebird Chronicles. I would rewrite these. This is a low sci-fi adventure series, and when I read book 1, I adored it. I gave this book 5 stars, and I was so excited to keep reading these books. The premise of this is we've got our main character, Kira, and her best friend and sidekick, the sentient battle drone named Jin. And they are both intergalactic war heroes, now in retirement being salvagers. But then one day they run into these aliens. They're pretty much the space elves. And those aliens are like, we can tell you're one of us, and in fact, you might just be our lost princess, so you have to come back with us now. And she's like, what? No! And then she does. And then Kira goes to the home planet of these aliens and has to prove herself in all of these games and stuff to show that she is competent and capable and doesn't need their protection and can go off in the galaxy on her own. And then of course there's themes of like her being the chosen one and having great magical powers and all these sci-fi abilities because she's a war hero. And like, it's so tropey. And I had so much fun with this book. It's got a really nice mix of like alien politicking and really good friendships, and also good mysteries about like how did she become the lost princess anyway, and also a nice romance starting up on the side. So I was really excited to start book 2. And then I got into book 2 and I realized it had like the same plot as book 1, except that it was a different royal family thinking that she was their lost princess. And there was no good development on that nice romance. So book 2 was a little bland because it was like the same as book 1, but I was still excited on the series, so I went to book 3. They're on a different planet, and then there are these games tournaments things where she has to prove herself to be capable to stay in the tournament. It was the same plot as books 1 and 2. And there was some development of the love plot, but also the development was very physical, which was quite a surprise because books 1 and 2 read pretty YA, and then book 3 was suddenly very adult in the romance. I would love to rewrite these books by giving each book a more different setup, and also really putting emotional time into changing her relationships with the characters instead of them just stagnating and then suddenly like smut. I rated these books on average 3.7 stars, and the book tone is Byzantium purple, which means emotional and plot character focus. And then I would recycle Spy Family. Yes, I don't have a heart. I'm sorry. This is a manga series that I've heard so many good things about, and the first few volumes were so fun. We've got 3 point of view characters in this series. It's a little family. The father is an undercover spy, the mother is an assassin in hiding, and the daughter is a telepath street rat. And this family gets assembled out of quick necessity for everyone's cover. One of the things that I like about the series is how cute it is. A lot of the time we are from the perspective of the little girl who, through her telepath abilities, does know that her adoptive father is a spy and her mother's an assassin, even though they don't know about each other or her. And I also admire the pacing of these issues because each issue is like broken up into sub-missions, and that does keep things moving at a brisk pace. But in the end, that serialized feeling of everything just being cut up into these chunks that you could really read in any order is what brought it down for me. Because through that, in the end, it felt like the story wasn't going anywhere. It was just this interesting premise, which then became a sandbox to play in, but not a road to a resolution of these conflicts. Which leaves me to reread The Bride Test, which I would gladly do. I'm trying to get into contemporary romance because I really love romance side plots in my fantasy books, right? But the contemporary romances I tried out before were just kind of way too boring and melodramatic for me. So I went in search of a contemporary romance that sounded the opposite of boring. The premise of this one is that Esme is living in Vietnam when this old lady visits because she is searching for a mail order bride for her son back in the United States, who is autistic and is having a hard time dating. As in, he doesn't want to do it, but his mother thinks it's very important, so she's gonna get him a bride because he can't do it for himself. And Esme, our main character, agrees to go to the United States for a summer to see if she can get along with her son before committing to an actual marriage with him. The son, our love interest, is rightfully horrified at this situation, but in the end is strong-armed to accepting Esme into his life. They get to know each other and actually fall in love. Here are the things that I didn't like about this book, and then I'll list some things that I really loved about this book. Didn't like, there were a few little conflicts along the way, little roadblocks in their relationship, which I will not tell you for spoilers. They were just swept under the rug, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. There was a big deal you were setting up, where to go, and it just went nowhere, so unsatisfying. And I also felt like this book had too much smut, but whatever, I can just skip those scenes. What I really loved about this book was that we got this dual perspective of these two people, neither of which super wanted to fall in love at the beginning, but as they get to know each other, it's like they can't help falling in love, and that was really cute to watch. They both also had their own emotional insecurities that they had to work through before being ready to be in a long-term relationship. So it gave me something to root for both of them by themselves and for them getting together. I was not bored during this book. Woo! And those are our books for today. My favorite of which I think was The Bride Test. So if you want to leave me an emoji in the comments, leave me an airplane for the immigration of our lovely Esme. Thank you for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons. If you want to get your name up here or get other perks like a monthly book club, exclusive videos, early access, book recommendations, merch, you can find the link to that in the footnotes, and I would be so grateful for it. Thank you.